Sveiki gyvi, laba diena Mo muziejaus lankytojai. Mes švenčiame antrąjį parodos Susitikimas, kurio nebuvo savaitgalį ir turim fantastiškai ypatingą svečią Willą Gompertzą, kurio mes iš tikrųjų laukėme. Ko gero net 5 metus jisai turėjo pas mus apsilankyti per muziejaus atidarimo 2018-aisiais, bet nepavyko tos organizuoti. Mes jo labai laukėme 2020 metais ir jau turėjome įsigiję bilietus, bet prasidėjo pandemija ir šitą susitikimą teko atšaukti. Na ir dabar pagaliau šitą labai ilgai lauktą svajonę išsipildė. Belaukdami mes išleidome jo knygą Ar tai menas, kurią matote čia, jų taip pat apsčiai rasite muziejaus parduotuvėje. Tai irgi tapo viena iš svarbių Mo muziejaus tokių tapatybės dalių, vienas mėgstamiausių leidinių, kurį mes turim. Mes esame ypatingai dėkingi Jungtinės karalystės ambasadai Lietuvoje už pagalbą organizuojant šitą susitikimą ir renginį, tai labai ačiū jiems. Na, o dabar nieko nelaukiant noriu pristatyti Will Gompertz. Welcome, the floor is yours. So, pasitikite aplodismentais.
Well, hello everybody. It's fantastic to be here. It's just brilliant to be in Lithuania. It's wonderful to be in Vilnius. It's fantastic not to be in England. The place is crazy at the moment. It's just a mad place. And Vilnius is so beautiful and wonderful and elegant. And it's my first trip here. As he was saying, I've tried to come here for many years. And now, at last, I'm here. So I'm very happy. Thank you for having me. So I thought we'd talk a bit about art. Is that okay? Yeah, okay. So I came to Vilnius, and I went to stay in the hotel that Berita had kindly organized. And I saw this. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I mean, he's a really good artist. He's making an important comment with this artwork. But like loads of people were looking at it and going, what's that? You know, I mean, why is that an artwork? So I thought we could think about why that's an artwork. And does anybody think this is an artwork, by the way? Yeah? Who doesn't think this is an artwork? Who thinks this is just a crashed car? It's an even more crashed car because I think a scooter ran into the window and smashed it. So this is... Yeah, this wouldn't have happened a few years ago. But the story for how this is art and why this is art and why it matters goes back, like, say, 500 years. So this is a very famous painting by the great Venetian Renaissance master Titian. And it is classical in every way. The way he's made this painting with the beautifully delicate brushstrokes, so you can't see them, and he's molded this three-dimensional body. The subject is mythical, it's Venus. It's a beautiful person. It's the epitome of beauty, and that she's also suggesting great love and loyalty. So she's about to be married, Venus, and you can see that she's in love because she's holding the red roses in her right hand, and you can see that she's always going to be faithful, because she has that cute little dog at the bottom of the bed. And that dog means she's going to be faithful forever, which is great. In the background, her two maids are in the chest, getting out nice things, and on one maid's arm is her wedding dress, because she's getting married tomorrow. And this is considered to be one of the great works of art. It's in the Uffizi Museum in Florence, and she's great. So, and you have the classical mathematical perspective, this idea of it, the image disappearing into the window and beyond. So this is absolutely the epitome of great Renaissance art. And this is how art was made. And this was what people understood was art, and this is what the academies taught as art. And then this guy came along. And this guy is a Frenchman, mid-19th century. He's an art critic. He is a big philosopher and thinker and drinker, maybe even some drugs. And he wrote this essay which was published in 1863, which is called The Artist and Modern Life. And in his essay, he argued that artists must stop painting mythological figures, must stop painting images from history, must stop painting high subjects, but instead they should just paint everyday life. They should just paint what's happening in the world around them. And this is the first big step towards what we call modern art. The reason we have this museum here and its collection upstairs and the exhibition is being shown starts with this really important idea from Baudelaire that art must be talking about everyday life. That's the notion of it. So this is the first thing. So he had a great friend called Edouard Manet. And Edouard Manet was a well-to-do French painter. He was actually totally brilliant. And he read this essay, and he thought this essay was very important, and he wanted to respond to it. So he really loved this painting by Titian. He'd seen it in Italy. He'd seen reproductions in Paris. And he spent lots of time studying it. And then he decided to make a response. So in response to this painting by Titian and to Baudelaire's instruction to paint everyday life, he made this painting. And this is considered to be the first painting of modern art. 1863, it's Olympia. So another mythological Greek figure you would think, but it's not. So this painting was shown at the very splendid Paris Academy in 1863, and it made everybody very cross. Everybody was furious with him. They told him he was a bad artist, a bad man, and they wanted this painting removed. They thought it was disgusting. And the reason they thought it was disgusting was it was really badly painted. So it was really done in sketchy forms. There's all that beautiful tonal subtlety that Titian had created has gone. This is like a sketch. The only bit which is done in any great detail is the hand, which is covering her private parts. The rest of it's really sketchy. And Titian painted a goddess. Titian painted Venus. Manet has painted everyday life. So his Olympia is a prostitute. So Olympia was a name for prostitutes in Paris in the 1860s. She was a friend of Manet's, and she was a prostitute. Just a side note, Manet died of syphilis. So choose your friends carefully. And so you know she's a prostitute because she has the flower in her hair like a concubine. She's looking directly at you. Her gaze is extraordinary. It's really aggressive because she is seeing you at the academy. Always it would be men walking around the academy, and she's confronting you as her next client. The maid is standing by her bed, holding flowers from her previous client. This time, we don't have a faithful dog, but we've got a black cat at the foot of the bed, scared to see the man coming in, suggesting that she's a lady of the night. So this is an extraordinary painting that we're talking about France in 1863, where to paint a prostitute was completely unheard of. It was an outrageous thing to do. It was very, very brave. It was very, very bold. And this picture changes art completely. So Manet was told he was no longer welcome in the salon. He could never show again in the salon. And this painting was disregarded. It was considered to be a disgrace. So that's 1863. This is the first time the modern picture comes, where the sketchy painting and this figure from modern day life. This is the first moment. And then, does anybody know who this is? This is a guy called Claude Monet. So Monet is often credited with being the founder of modern art. And this is actually a painting by Manet of Monet. I know. And Manet has lent Monet his boat because Monet didn't have any money, but Manet had money. I know. So here we have Monet sitting on a boat lent to him by Manet. Monet doesn't have much money, as I said, but Manet dies. And this painting that Manet had done of Olympia, nobody wanted it. And so Monet, who had no money, went round all his friends and arranged enough money to buy this painting for the French nation, for a French nation which didn't even want it. But he bought it anyway, and he gave it to the French nation. And weirdly, it's only ever left Paris once in the last 150 years. After a while, they realized it was a pretty cool painting. Meanwhile, Monet took up Manet's mantle of... You keeping up with this? Monet kept Manet's mantle of being the revolutionary. So Monet makes this painting in 1872, like a super famous painting. It gave the name, this was the name it gave to the Impressionists. This was the first modern art movement. So this is an Impression sunrise. He's painted it in Le Havre on the northern coast of France. It's where he was born and brought up. And it's a beautiful painting. And it's, again, it's a painting of everyday life. It's a painting of modernity. This is a modern scene in the harbour at Le Havre that is done in a really sketchy way. And is capturing a fleeting moment of real life. That's what he was trying to do. And Monet is widely regarded as the leader of the Impressionists and therefore the leader of the movement of modern art. It's always considered to be a French idea. But I'm English. And I just wanted to point this out. That he painted this in 1872. In 1871, Monet was in London because the Franco-Prussian War was happening and he didn't want to get involved. So he was in London where he saw this painting. And this painting is by Turner, the great English romantic painter. Does it look similar at all? A little bit similar? I think it looks quite similar. So what we have here in this painting is Turner has painted this ship called the Fighting Tamara. So this was a ship which fought in the Napoleonic Wars with part of Nelson's fleet. But what Turner is actually painting here, he's a romantic painter. He's painting an end of a time. So the Fighting Tamara is a sailing ship, a great big sailing ship. And it's being tugged at sunset to be smashed to bits. It's going to be broken up. And it's being tugged to its death by a steam tug. And so it's the old giving way to the new. So the old ways of doing things, sailing, is giving way to modernity and industry, which is represented by the steam, the tug. And so the old boat is sailing, is being towed off into the sunset, into a past period. So Turner is lamenting the past. He's sad that the past is changing. Whereas Monet is doing exactly the opposite. This is a sunrise. So while Turner is sad about the end of the sailing period and the advent of industry, Monet is absolutely celebrating it. This is a sunrise. This is a moment. You can see that Le Havre, you can see up here in the corner, can you see here with all the factories and all the smoke coming out of the chimneys. He's celebrating modernity. This is modern life. This is what he wants to paint. So Turner painted a sunset. He's painting a sunrise of the modern world. And so for this, he's credited for founding the idea of modern art. But actually, the real founder, the real instigator for modern art wasn't really a painter at all. It was this, the camera. The camera is the thing that changed everything. Up until the advent of the camera in the mid-1850s, that artists had to paint people's likenesses and the likenesses of fields, of landscapes, and that was their job. But when the camera came along, it could do that. So the painters no longer had to worry about painting a very good picture of you, which was your likeness. Instead, they had to think, what was an artist's job? And an artist's job was to try and capture the reality of everyday life, but not like a camera could. So this is where the huge change happens. And the person who led the change, the person that Picasso calls the father of us all, and Matisse calls the father of us all, is this guy, who is Paul Cezan. Cezan, in my opinion, is the great genius, because he understands that artists have to respond to the camera. Artists have to think, what can they do that a camera cannot? And he worked out that one of the most important things an artist can do, or we can do as humans, that a camera cannot, is to look with two eyes. To look with two eyes. He realized that a camera only ever looks with one eye. It's a monocular vision, whereas we have binocular vision. So he starts to look at subjects with two eyes. So he starts to look from two perspectives. So he chooses to do still lives. And still lives at that time in Paris were considered to be a very low subject. The high subject was history painting, then religious and mythological painting, then portraiture, then landscapes, and right at the very, very bottom was still lives. They were considered to be really quite tacky. But Cezan starts to paint these still lives and elevate their status within the academy as a very serious subject. And so what he's doing here, this is a remarkable painting. What he's doing here is looking at a subject with two eyes. And by that, I mean, if he was looking this with a single lens, if you took a picture of this with your camera, if you took a picture of a still life with your iPhone, then everything would be organized to disappear into a single vanishing point, like mathematical perspective. Because the way you can construct that is because you just do it with a single eye. But if you use two eyes, you're immediately looking at something from two different perspectives. You're looking at it from here, and you're looking at it from here. So he's making a painting where he's seeing the still life from straight on and from above. So if he was following the rules that Titian had worked with when he was painting Venus of mathematical perspective, the traditional rules, then all this fruit would just fall off the table. But because he's looking at the front of the table, you can see here, and he's looking on top of the table, so he's looking at the front of the jug and down into the top of the jug. He's creating a picture which is looking at something from two different angles, from the front and from the top. And the only way he can make that work as a design is to start to tip the top of the table up towards the surface of the picture. So the idea of the illusion of three dimensions, he gets rid of it, and he replaces it with putting all the visual information in an ordered fashion right at the top. So everything comes to the surface. So before, in the old days, you would see an image and everything would recede. Now he's bringing all the visual information to the surface because he's looking at it from two perspectives. So he has to get twice as much information into one image onto the surface. Are you with me? So this is so important. Because when he starts to be honest and say, we see things with two eyes, he changes art forever. So this he painted in 1905. He died a year later in 1906, and there was this massive exhibition. And every single artist from all over Europe came to see that exhibition in Paris. And one artist in particular came every single day for 30 days to study Cezanne. And that artist was called Pablo Picasso. And Picasso came day after day after day to understand what it was that Cezanne was doing. And he realized that Cezanne had changed art by looking at images from two different perspectives with both eyes. So he thought this was an amazing idea. And he said, what if you look at an image from three perspectives? So from one eye, two eye, plus what you know about that subject. What if you don't deny what you know and actually show what you know about a subject? So he starts to work on this picture, again, a little bit inspired by Manet. So this is called La Demoiselle d'Avignon. That is not Avignon in France. That's Avignon, which is a district in Barcelona, which is where the prostitutes hang out. So here we have 5 prostitutes. We have the bowl of fruit, which is to suggest the pleasures they are going to offer. In the original sketches, it also had a skull and a doctor to suggest what happened if you hung out with the prostitutes. But he removed those. So he makes this extraordinary painting called La Demoiselle d'Avignon, perhaps the most famous painting in the history of modern art. And he starts to break down this image of the figure to not just 2 perspectives, but 3 and 4. So you can see he's put these elliptical Egyptian-type masks on, that he's carved their bodies up into bits and rearranged them in strange shapes. That everything, there's no sense of 3 dimensions here. that curtain at the back, in the way that Manet had brought the curtain at the back with Olympia, this curtain has come right up to the very, very, very top of the picture plane. So things that used to stand back like this, now everything is right there. It's got like completely in your face. There is no sense of depth of field here at all. So Picasso makes this painting. He shows his friends. Everybody thinks he's completely crazy. They think he's gone mad. So he takes this painting, he rolls it up, and he leaves it in the back of his studio for 25 years. And it's not seen again until eventually the Museum of Modern Art in New York buy it, and they show it in 1937, and suddenly it becomes very famous. So a painting which was made in 1907 was considered to be terrible, becomes the most famous painting in the world 30 years later. And in that is a really important message about artists, and maybe about the car we saw upside down, is they have this ability to think ahead. They understand things that maybe many of us miss. So it's always worth, in my opinion, taking artists seriously, looking at what they do and thinking about what they do. So here's this painting. So this is La Demoiselle d'Avignon. And that leads directly to Cubism. So Cubism is a way of making pictures that Picasso developed with Georges Braque, his great friend. So this was completely rethinking how to make art. So what they were trying to do here was to confront one of the great lies of art. And all art, of course, is an illusion. But the greatest illusion that Picasso and Braque thought was the illusion of 3 dimensions, because canvas is 2-dimensional. So they were trying to make absolutely clear what they were painting was in 2 dimensions. So they took a 3-dimensional box and they broke it up and they remade it in 2 dimensions. Maybe it's got a box, have they? But if you, I just use this. This is I don't know who, is this yours? Oh, okay. So here we have 3 dimensions. What they do is they break it up. I'm not going to do this, but they cut off every area of this, and then they remake it in 2 dimensions, like a collage. They just place it bit by bit. Thanks very much. And so it becomes very difficult to read. It becomes difficult to understand that this is a violin and a candlestick. Can you see the candlestick? You can see the violin. And what it is, here's bits of the violin. And what they're doing every time, so because they've rearranged 3 dimensions into 2 dimensions, they've broken it and they've rebuilt it in fragments. Every time they change angle, every time they change perspective, they put a hard, dark line in. So every time there's a dark line, it suggests you're looking at the object from a different perspective. So this is the whole thing is broken up. So actually, that's why they use such a boring palette, because if it was lots of colors, it'd be impossible to read. So this is a way of trying to make something legible, which is really complicated. So everything comes to the surface. This is a 3-dimensional object represented honestly in 2 dimensions. So they do this, and the paintings become harder and harder and harder to understand. And so, around 1912, they start to add words to what they're doing. So when you're looking at it, you can understand what they're showing. So they've added the word here, jour, for journal. So that's good. And then sometimes they'd add numbers if it was a train or something. But here they do something extraordinary. And this is one of the most significant moments in the story of modern art. This is so bold. So what they start to do is not only do they start to write on their paintings so you can understand what they are saying, and as you notice, this goes straight back to Manet. All they're doing is painting objects of everyday life, simple objects, stuff they just see around them. So this is just a cafe table, like you could just get out in the street just outside. But what's so different about this is that the chair caning, so this is basically a picture of a glass tabletop. So it's a glass tabletop in a cafe on which is a journal, and you can see the coffee mug, and you can see through the glass table to the seat of the chair, which is being pushed underneath. Do you see that? What is so different about this is Picasso didn't paint the chair caning. That is just some paper he had in his drawer. So in his drawer, he had this piece of paper for wrapping presents, which was of chair caning. So he just used it to line his drawer. So he took this bit of paper and he stuck it into the picture, which was an extraordinary thing because nobody had done that before. This was the first time a collage had been made. So he takes something from a drawer which was ubiquitous and worthless, and he moves it a meter, and he puts it in his painting and gives it value and makes it unique. So he changes the way we treat that object. So something which was just a bit of cheap wrapping paper suddenly becomes part of a work of art. So it's a massive change. So suddenly something, so Picasso is not only painting everyday life, he starts to grab a piece of everyday life and put it in his artwork. That had never been done before. And it directly leads on to this moment. This is 1917. So this is Marcel Duchamp, who is a French artist who was very competitive with Picasso. And to be honest, he wasn't as good. And he went to America, to settle in America. And he had lots of friends in Manhattan. And between them, they decided to put on this major exhibition, the biggest exhibition of contemporary art ever held in the United States. And anybody, absolutely anybody, could show their work there. Anybody in this room, if it's 1917, and you were in Manhattan, and you wanted to pay $5 to become a member of the society, and $1 to show your work, they would show your work at this amazing exhibition. And that was the deal. There were no judges and no juries. If you wanted to show your work, you could. And Duchamp was one of the organizers, decided, he was very naughty, he decided he wanted to test how liberal this idea was. Would they really show anything? So he asks 4 questions about art, 4 questions which have never been asked before. The first question he asks is, why does art have to be beautiful? So he goes and chooses a subject which is what he described as anti-retinal, a subject that is ugly. And the reason he chose a subject that is ugly is the date of the work. This is 1917. We're in the First World War. There is nothing much beautiful going on, and art should be about depicting everyday life. So he chooses something that is ugly, something that speaks of that moment, something that is considered then revolting. So first question, why does art have to be beautiful? So he chooses something ugly. Then he says, why does art have to be made by an artist? Why can't I just select something? So he selects a urinal. Then he says, why does art have to be unique? So he goes and chooses something which is available to everybody, something which is just is the opposite of unique. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. And then the last question he asks, this is the question that changes art completely, is why is the medium more important than the idea? So up until 1917, if you wanted to be considered an artist, you had to choose your medium first. So either you're painting on canvas or panel, or you're carving wood or stone. The medium, and then your idea. Duchamp said, no. The idea comes first. And only once you had your idea should you choose the most appropriate medium with which to communicate it. He flipped it on his head. And he, in this instance, with his urinal, wanted to challenge what people thought art was. He wanted, I suppose, this is an English expression, do you know it, to take the piss? This is what he wanted to do. So he makes this. So he asks these big 4 questions, which changes art. He sends this artwork to be shown at this massive, great contemporary art show. He doesn't say it's by Marcel Duchamp, he says it's by Armat. He signs it by Armat. And he argues by changing the context, by taking a urinal from a plumber's merchant's and putting a urinal in an art gallery, changing its function, it changes its purpose, just as Picasso had done with that bit of paper from his drawer into the artwork. So he presents this, he argues that it's an artwork, he sends it in, he pays his $5, he pays his $1, and then he watches as all his friends have this massive argument. Like they have this huge argument. This is not art, this is disgraceful. And they decide that they will not show it. And not only that, they decide they won't show it. It's so disgusting, they smashed it. They destroyed it. Duchamp just laughed. Just went off and bought another one. So simple, right, with this new way of making art. So this is the moment it changes. This is where the idea becomes more important than the medium. The idea comes first, and then you choose a medium, which, of course, gives us this. This is how this becomes art, because the idea behind this work is, you can read about it yourself, but is about a convening of NATO grandees in Vilnius town hall, and the artist who made this work, his car would always break down. It was a French car, he should have known. Just joking, but it was French, just joking. And here we go, all these years later, he's commenting on, obviously, some of the devastating things happening not very far away in Ukraine. But the idea is the important thing here, and the execution is the car. This would not work as well, would it, if you just painted it on the canvas or carved it on a bit of wood. It is actually about the installation. And this all goes back to Duchamp and then Picasso. So this is great. This woman is amazing. So let me just check how we're doing. Groovy. So if the idea comes first and you choose your medium later, surely then one of the most useful media any of us have got is ourselves, our own bodies. Why don't we use our own bodies to be the medium? So what happens after Duchamp and everything after that is this notion of performance art. That by using your body as a medium, that can be an artwork as well. You have the idea and you express it with your body. And one of the best people at this is this lady here called Marina Abramovich. And here she is with her art partner and lover, Uday, at the time. What's so funny about it? This was shown in, this is English people. So can you imagine, we have a naked artist and a naked artist, and they're like this, and they have English people go in the middle. And they find it super awkward, right? And the whole point is it's supposed to be super awkward. It's supposed to make you feel and sense and think about nakedness. It's meant to think about your body, to think about other people's body. And so Marina Abramovich was brought up in what was then Tito's Czechoslovakia. And one day when she was lying in the park, she saw these aeroplanes, these fighter jets, go above her. So she went to the military and she said, I saw your fighter jets and I think they're like a performance. Could you please do it again tomorrow? But could you then put some colors out of the back of them, please? She's 17. And she said this to the military commander, who then told her to leave the country. Her dad was in the military. So she came to Edinburgh, and then she settled down in New York, and she was an amazing artist. And then in 2012, she got has it run out of batteries? Is it moving? Oh. Do you want to give me, maybe just flick it to the next slide. How are you doing, Marcus? Exciting. Oh. Anyway, thank you very much. Good night. Online friends, we have lots of people watching online. Oh, this is like, I wasn't expecting this at all, Marcus. This is great. Does anybody know? Oh, you see who that's by, yeah. We want to go back to Marina Abramovich, and she's naked, and she's black and white. So online friends, we're just having a little tech moment. Here we go. So this is the idea that you start to use your body as art and performance art. And then in 2012, she had this exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in America, in New York. And there'd never been an exhibition of performance art before. There's never been a major retrospective, rather, of a performance artist before. Because it's quite difficult. You kind of had to be there, right? So she makes this new work for the museum. And it's called The Artist is Present. And this is extraordinary. So, and this work consisted of this. That she sat, here's Marina, she sat in her red dress all day, every day, for 8 hours without moving. She didn't move, she didn't go to the loo, anything. She stayed there for 8 hours. And she sat in this chair with this table, and then this chair was empty. And anybody who wanted to come and sit in that chair and be in the same space as her could, but you couldn't laugh or you couldn't joke and you couldn't touch her. You just sat there. That's it. That's what you did. That was her idea. And the curators at the Museum of Modern Art thought, God, Marina, we'll okay, but I'm not sure how many people will come. I'm not sure how popular that will be. And she said, it'll be okay. She always says, it'll be okay. So she does this thing. So she does this exhibition called The Artist is Present, and this chair is empty. And the curators thought maybe over 3 months, I don't know, 500 or 600 people would come. In the end, just under 1 million people came to see this amazing artwork, to sit in this chair. And there was a queue all the way up Fifth Avenue to come and sit in Marina's chair. Some people would come and sit there for like 20 seconds. Some people, one person sat there all day, which really annoyed the rest of the queue. So this is extraordinary to think about. And these people had an amazing moment. And even and you saw the picture earlier of Ulay, her lover for many years. They'd split up. They'd split up about 20 years earlier on the Great Wall of China. The idea was they were going to walk from either end of the Great Wall of China, meet in the middle and get married. But in between times, they decided they didn't love each other. So they met in the middle and decided to split up. And she hadn't seen him for 20 years. And there's a wonderful YouTube video of Ulay, who sadly has now died, coming to sit in this chair across from Marina. And they're just crying and crying and crying. It's really beautiful. But the point is, the art is happening in the middle. The artwork is coming out of her head, through her body, into the body of the other person, and it sits in the middle. It kind of doesn't exist. It's completely, that notion of the fleeting moment of catching the everyday. Marina has done that so beautifully. And for many years, people thought she was just a joke. She was silly. But they don't realize that art is incredibly important. Art touches souls. It moves people. It is the most incredible thing we have as a human species, is to communicate through ideas. So she creates this thing where performance art becomes a fundamental part of what we now consider to be art. So much so that this great work won the Venice Biennale in 2019. Do you recognize this? This is, of course, the Lithuanian pavilion at the Venice Biennale in 2019, which has since been traveling around the world. And I went to see it in Venice, and it was extraordinary. And again, it is this notion that the idea comes first. The idea comes first, and only then. And this was an idea about saving the planet, the planetary crisis, issues of disposable culture, all sorts of things. So many things in this beautiful 60-minute opera. And it's presented in all these found spaces, and it's dealing with this idea that art is always an illusion, of course. And it's pretending that it's a beach, and these people are just hanging around. And it is one of the great works of the 21st century. And it comes out of this notion of performance art, which comes out of Duchamp's urinal, which comes out of Picasso's bit of paper, which comes out of Cezanne's new way of seeing, which comes out of the camera, which comes out of Manet painting Olympia, which starts with Baudelaire saying, you have to paint what's going on around you. And this is what this artwork is. But most spectacularly, most incredibly, somebody I really want you to know about is this guy called Theaster Gates. So, has anybody heard of Theaster Gates? So Theaster Gates is an African-American who was brought up in Chicago in the poor side of town. He's the youngest of 9 children. He has 8 older sisters. They were a very poor family. His mum was a primary school teacher, and his dad tarred roofs. He put tar on roofs. And Theaster was quite a clever child, and he did quite well at school. And then he went to university in Chicago, and he did really well at university, and he eventually got a job at the university teaching town planning. So he's a town planning academic. And at the weekends, he decided he liked to do pottery. He liked to do ceramics. So he'd make some plates and bowls and mugs, and then every month he'd go and sell them at a county fair. And at the county fair, he'd sell his plate for $5 and his bowl for $4, etc. And people would come up to him and say, Theaster, I love your plate. I'll give you $3 for it. And he said, I don't want to haggle. I made this with my head, my heart, and my hands. You know, what I'd like to do is I'd like you to pay $5 for it. Actually, forget it. I'll just give it to you. I'll give it to you. He found the whole thing very demeaning. So eventually, he decided to stop selling his pottery at county fair, and instead, he'd have an exhibition of his pottery. He'd have an exhibition. And so he rented a space in Chicago, which is no bigger, really, than between these two high top tables. And he did an exhibition of all his pottery, his bowls and his plates, except he didn't say they were by Theaster Gates. He said they were by this Japanese master, Soji Yamaguchi. And Soji Yamaguchi, he put together two different names. Soji Hamada, who was indeed a great Japanese master, and Yamaguchi, which is an area in Japan where ceramics are taught. And he put them together, and he figured the Americans would never work it out, which, of course, they didn't. So he has this show, right, of his plates and his bowls, and everything sells. Everything sells in 1 hour, and nobody asks for a cent of anything. And he wasn't selling his plates and his bowls for $5 or $4, which frankly is kind of what they're worth. He was selling them for $400 and $500, and they all went because he told this story of Soji Yamaguchi, and he told everybody that Soji Yamaguchi was a Japanese master who had come to America to work with the black clay of Mississippi, had fallen in love with an African-American woman, and had taken her back eventually to see his village in Japan, and had died, tragically, in a car crash. So Theaster sells all this stuff, and he goes back to being a town planning guy at the university. And eventually, the art world discover that this stuff was made by Theaster Gates. There is nobody called Soji Yamaguchi. And they walk up to Theaster, go, Theaster Gates, you are fantastic. In fact, we think you're an artist. And Theaster goes, really? Am I? Cool. So he then uses the money that he made from selling his plates and his bowls as Soji Yamaguchi to buy an old shack on the south side of Chicago. And I don't know if anybody's been to Chicago, but the south side is quite a deprived area. There's really, in many ways, some sort of apartheid system still operating in America. In fact, in that space, it's 99% African American, and it's not a well looked after space. And Theaster wanted to go and live on the south side to show that you could be a successful African American and contribute to society. So and give those people a chance and the opportunity to trust them. So he goes there, he buys this old shack, and it's an old shack that is just full of debris. So he starts taking all this debris out, And now you and I would put this debris in a skip. We would get rid of it. It's rubbish. But Theaster decided everything he took out was precious. Every object contained a story. So this is going back to the idea of the urinal again. Every object contained a story. It just needed to be thought of differently, from a different perspective, like Cezan thought about things. So he starts to take all this stuff out and starts to make formal arrangements of it. So he finds an old fire hose in the basement and he recoils it. He finds an old drawer and in the back of a drawer, and he nails it to the drawer, and he gets a bit of the balustrade of the staircase. Oh, I'll show you. This is what he does. And he makes it into this. This is just rubbish out of his house. And then he sells it. He sells it for $150,000. I know, isn't it amazing? And then he does it again and again and again and again. He said he can't believe how wet rich folks get about this stuff. You love Theaster, don't you? Yeah. And he's amazing. So he does this and he sells all this stuff. He calls it a gut rehab. And he goes through the south side of Chicago, buying house after house, taking all the rubbish out, formalizing it, making it look beautiful, and selling it to rich folks as art. He talks about leveraging this notion of art. But what he's doing is incredible. So here's one of the places on, these are two houses he's done on the south side of Chicago. So he takes the stuff out, he sells it to rich folks. He brings the money back to the south side, and he buys a house, and he does it up by taking stuff out and selling it. And each house he gives to the community. The first house is called the Black Listening House, which is full of African-American music. He's done the same with cinema and film. He's done the same with literature. He's worked with Mayor Rahm Emanuel, who is Obama's old running mate, to repossess and recreate an old bank and make it into a community center. So one man using art, who isn't even an artist really, is slowly but surely transforming the face of the south side of Chicago. So anybody who says art is just silly and isn't important needs to think about Theaster Gates. And this is why in every society so many people in the establishment are frightened of art, because art changes the world. Theaster Gates is just using this notion of art in a really positive way to transform the south side of Chicago. He is an amazing guy. So, we haven't got long. We've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes to do the whole other side of the story of art. So one side is the car by Danius, which you can see by the town hall, and why that is art. And do we know why that's art now? Tell me you know why that's art now. Thank you. So the other side of it is this. You know, people look at this painting by Malevich, 1915, the Black Square, going, "Oh, come on." You know, my 5-year-old could do that. So why is this art? So very simply, and this is another huge movement which came out of modernism, is abstraction, which is what this is about. Abstract art has got one fundamental thought behind it, and that thought is to free you from the misery of being alive. So there was an essay written by Schopenhauer called The Will and Representation. And in that essay, he argues that it's absolutely awful being alive because we are never satisfied. We always want more. We can never be pleased. The only time we can feel true happiness is when we can escape our will, when we can escape this notion of being alive. And the best way of doing that is through art, specifically through music. Because, you know, classical music, all you can hear the sounds, and it just leaves your imagination to go wherever it wants, so you are free. And expressionism, abstraction here, is exactly the same idea. What Malevich is doing is taking everything away from the real world. So you look at this painting, and you are not reminded of houses or hedges or horses. You're not reminded of anything. You just see a painting of a black square, and you deal with it. And by dealing with it, because it doesn't represent anything, you can't hold on to anything from the real world, you are free, and your mind is free to think and feel and respond and react. And that is the notion of abstraction. That's why abstraction exists. So just hold that thought and look at this. It all starts with Cezan, of course. And Cezan, when he was looking with two eyes, also realized every single painting ever made in the history of art until this painting was a big, fat lie. Because it said, if you look into the middle distance, if you look at a landscape, painters painted everything in perfect focus. Everything, the grass was in focus, the people were in focus, the trees were in focus. And he goes, no. If I look 8 kilometers out to Mont Saint-Victoire in the south of France there, everything I look out at is not in focus. Actually, what I see is a series of patterns, geometric shapes, and colors. That's what I actually see. So to start to paint that truth, that honesty, Cezan starts to remove pictorial detail. He starts to abstract visual information to create an overall design that represents what he actually sees. And the way he structures that, so the painting doesn't fall apart, is on a grid of horizontal and vertical lines. So you can see with the viaduct, you have the horizontal, and obviously with the tree trunk, you have the vertical. And if you see this painting, or look at it in a book, and you put your arm over the tree trunk, suddenly those leaves look like they're 8 kilometers away. So the vertical line is to suggest depth, and the horizontal line is to suggest breadth. So it's a grid. He creates this grid, and this is at the beginning of abstraction in modern art. He removes the visual information. He creates a grid in which everything he wants to say that he can see can be described. So this is another artist who's Dutch, who went to see Picasso and Braque and discovered Cezanne. So he's painting like this, and he sees Cezanne's painting, and he talks to Braque and Picasso, who are doing Cubism, and he realizes this painting is kind of not really telling the truth. So he takes same painting, he takes more information away. Same tree, he takes more information away. Same tree, even more information, and then eventually, boom. That's Mondrian, working with exactly the same principles as Cezanne. Horizontal and vertical lines are the structure. The primary colors are there to describe all the emotions in the world. He was Dutch. He wasn't very emotional. So he just needs 3 primary colors, job done. And that's dealing with all the opposites: happy, sad, hot, cold, male, female. And then that creates this notion of modernism. His partner was a guy called Theo van Doesburg. Theo van Doesburg goes to teach at the Bauhaus in Germany, very famously, as does this man, Vasily Kandinsky, who was a Russian lawyer until he saw these paintings by Monet when he was 30 years old and decided he had to become an artist. He also loved Vincent van Gogh. And Van Gogh was the first artist who distorted the image to express how he felt about it. So Van Gogh didn't just paint what he saw, he painted about how he felt about what he saw. So he starts to bend those shapes, because that's how he feels when he's looking out at this starry night. He feels this mystical movement. He feels this passion. And so you're not just seeing the starry night, you're seeing Van Gogh's version of what he's seeing of a starry night. So it's really, really personal. And that's what leads Kandinsky to start making these sort of paintings, and then abstract paintings like this, which is about music. And then this is how the art world works. So the art is so international. We've touched on so many countries already, including Lithuania. This is in America. This is the Guggenheim, what is now the Guggenheim Museum in Manhattan. They had a huge collection of Kandinsky paintings. This is the niece of Solomon Guggenheim. This is a lady called Peggy Guggenheim, who is amazing. She's great fun. She had 3 great loves in life: money, art, and men. When she was asked how many husbands she had, she said, "Mine or other people's?" But Peggy was amazing in many ways. Her father died on a Titanic. He left her some money. She went to Paris. She got all this art. She took it over to America. And this is her in Venice, where she met Jackson Pollock and his wife, Lee Krasner. Pollock worked in her uncle's museum as an invigilator. So he worked in the Guggenheim Museum looking at all those Kandinskys. So he starts making these sort of works, which are very surrealist. This is because Peggy has brought all the surrealists over from America because it's the war. They're now being shown, over from Europe because it's the war. They're now being shown in New York. Jackson Pollock starts to respond to them, having seen Kandinsky. And here he is. Do you know what I like about this painting? It's a great haircut, don't you think? So he starts to make these works. So Pollock, this is a bit getting about expressionism. So Pollock starts to, he was a drunk, and he was very depressed in many ways. But this is a completely new form of art he makes. So you have surrealism, which has come over from Europe. You have expressionism, which we know from Van Gogh. We have abstraction, which we've seen from Malevich. And then in this moment, in the early 50s, we see Pollock bringing it all together. So so Peggy gave him some money to make some art for 6 months, but all he did was drink. And eventually she said, I'm going to stop giving you money unless you do something to hang up in my apartment, and I need it in 2 days' time. So he stopped drinking for 2 days, and for 2 days he had this canvas on the floor and he threw everything at it. And he created this thing called Mural. And this was the first piece of abstract expressionist work. So you'll see quite a lot of it in the exhibition upstairs. And so this is the first time that you have abstraction, Malevich's Square, which is about, I'm not going to show you anything real here to hang on to, and expressionism, I'm really going to express my inner feelings. And Pollock was a Jungian, not a Freudian, but Pollock believed in a universal unconscious, that we could look at a painting like this and we could all feel it, we could all sense it. It's not a personal comment that he's making, he's trying to make a universal comment about the human condition. And it is an amazing painting. And it's so amazing, Peggy asked him to go and make 20 more paintings like this. And she did an exhibition of his paintings, just like this. And they were selling for $150. Do you know what they sell for now? It's like $500 million. Do you know how many she sold? 0. And again, that message that artists are always ahead of time, they're always thinking ahead. So I'm just going to leave you with this final thought, which is this. Jackson Pollock lived in New York. He had a house in Springs, which is out towards the residential area by the seaside. It's really super nice. You just take a train ride out there. He lived out there with his friend, Willem de Kooning. And Willem de Kooning was a Dutch artist who moved over to America, who made this painting, which was the first painting I saw which made me fall in love with art. It's called Rosy Fingered Dawn at Lowest Point. And here I am looking at it. It's in 2019. And I saw this about 35 years ago in Amsterdam. And I'd gone there with a girlfriend, to be honest. And we'd gone to Amsterdam, and we had this wonderful... well, actually, I had an idea of what we were going to do, and she had an idea of what we were going to do. And they weren't totally together. They weren't aligned. And so she said if I was going to the cafe I wanted to go to, then I should go to the museum she wanted to go to. So we went into the Stedelijk Museum and saw this painting. And you know when sometimes when you go to a museum you immediately feel tired and your back starts aching? Yeah, I had that. And then we went in there and she was a bit cross and said, well, really, I should pay some attention. And I bumped into this work, and you can still see it now in Amsterdam. And it was just the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. It's like poetry in paint. It's absolutely extraordinary painting. And so that day I fell in love twice. Fell in love with art, and I fell in love with her. Isn't that nice? And here's my final thing. Here we are 30 years later. Hey! And just one final point about the stadium. It's so beautiful. And you know where it comes from now, because this is classic modernism. This comes from Cezan, who Le Corbusier, the great architect, adored. This is about geometric shapes, simplicity, the essence of the truth, getting to the matter of things. creating something truly beautiful. This is an amazing building with a deep history, which is some of it troubled, but do look after it. Don't let them knock it down. And thank you so much for having me. Thank you. You have lots of other things. Do you want to say lots of things to do? But if anybody would like their book signed, I'd be super happy to do that. Okay. Thank you very much.